Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you again with another deck profile, and for today's video we're going to be doing an updated Tearlament deck. Now, unfortunately, I do have some pretty shocking news to share with you. For the first time in history, Tearlaments is truly not strongest. I know, it sucks to hear and it's almost blasphemous coming out of my mouth, right? But that's just the harsh reality of that. This format is just, it's really not that kind to tier, right? Shifters everywhere, dwellers everywhere, Bystials are everywhere, and then that's not even to mention like the other handships that you just very quickly, unfortunately, just overwhelmed this deck. But even so, we're still going to try our best and persevere and try to make this deck as competitive as possible. So with that out of the way, let's jump straight into it. As always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup first, and we're of course going to be playing 3 Tearlaments Reinoheart. And as far as like the modern Tearlament deck is concerned, the entire deck basically runs through this card being able to be summoned and resolved. As on normal or special, you're able to foolish any Tearlament monster from your deck to the graveyard, and then from there, whether you're sending like a tier cache to mill 2 cards or you're sending any of the other guys to be able to fusion summon, you've basically just unlocked your deck, or you're attempting to unlock the rest of your deck. And this card is just, it basically bridges you into pretty much whatever extra deck play you may want at the moment, which, you know, it's pretty good. So yeah, you pretty much have to play 3 Reinoheart in the current iteration of Tearlament. Then to go with our 3 Reinohearts, we're playing 3 Tearlaments Kashtira. On normal or special, you're able to mill 3 cards, and then when it's sent to the graveyard, you're able to mill 2 more cards. So just having a potential mill 5 is always greatly appreciated. And then for the 1-of tier monsters, you're playing the 1-of Scheiren, the 1-of Havnis, and the 1-of Merrli. These are the ones that allow you to fusion summon when they're sent to the graveyard by card effect, and they all also allow you to mill 3 cards depending on if you're able to meet the conditions, right? Like Merrli on normal or special mills 3. Scheiren is able to reveal itself and discard a monster to mill 3. And then Havnis, if your opponent decides to activate a monster effect on the field, you're able to mill 3. However, you do have to be a little bit more careful with these types of cards because, like I said earlier, Bystials are everywhere. And because we're not playing the Tearlaments Crime in the main deck, losing one of these is pretty detrimental in a lot of cases. So if you want to like prioritize which ones like would be like the least, which ones would hurt the least to lose first, I'd probably go with Havnis as the one that you care about the least, then Merrli, and then Scheiren as the most important. But that's just me. I know everyone like values them differently, but I typically play with like Scheiren being like the most important one, just because it's able to get rid of bricks in your hand and also mill 3 and then provide you with like Exceed Father and just countless other little different aspects that, you know, allow you to play more effectively. And that's it for the tier monsters. We're just maxing out on all of them because we pretty much have to. And then for the other cards, we're playing 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. This is literally just here for the Mole Charmies. If they didn't exist, I would not be playing this straight up. But because they do, we have to play them, unfortunately. Then for the other cards, we are going to be playing the Horus engine, which means we're playing the 3 Imsety and the 1 Hapi. They're fine, you know. They give you access to the Zombie Vampire, which allows you to mill 4 more cards. And even without the Zombie Vampire, they're still pretty solid, especially because of King Sarcophagus being able to get rid of cards like Trivy Karma or your Shufflers, and then just filling your graveyard with like big bodies that you can bring out and just put pressure on your opponent with immediately. And then not to mention Horus or Imsety being a dark monster allows you to fusion summon with it in order to just make your plays a little bit more easily. So yeah, I really appreciate the Imsety or the Horus engine through Imsety. So yeah, I feel like you definitely got to play those. And then we are going to be playing Bystials. So as a result, we're playing the 1 Bystial Magnamhut and the 2 Bystial Druiswurm. They're just really strong cards, right? As long as the Fiendsmith engine exists, you have to be playing some kind of capacity of Bystials in your deck. And I feel like this is probably on like the safer side, you know, just the 1 Magnamhut and the 2 Druiswurm. We don't play like any rank 6s or anything, but having a big body in the form of like Druiswurm, right, that can just completely disrupt your opponent's board is just always going to be greatly appreciated. Then for the other cards, we're playing 2 Beastking of the Swamp just so that we can actually fusion summon into cards of Rukolos and like whatever else we may be having in the extra deck, who knows. But that's basically its main purpose, but it is also a level 4 water, so if you happen to normal summon it, or if you like mill it off a Zombie Vampire, for example, you can then special summon it, and then you can overlay with your Reinohearts to make Bahamut Toad just a little bit more easily. Then for the other cards, we're playing 1 Mudora the Sword Oracle. We just need 1 Shuffler. We don't play the other one in the main. It's always going to be in the side, just for that we can put it in when we know for sure that we're going to go first and we're playing it's like a deck that actually requires its graveyard. But yeah, 1 Mudora, perfectly fine. And we just played over Keldo because its stats are a little bit better. And then lastly, we're playing 1 Kashtira Fenrir. I still don't really know how to feel about this card in this deck just because it does conflict with the Bystials, right? Especially when you're going second. But it's also a pretty solid starter as you just special summon it, then you add Tear Cache, and then from there you can potentially start your milling plays. And Fenrir on its own is obviously just like another phenomenal card, right? As if your opponent decides to activate a monster effect, you will then in turn be able to activate your Fenrir's effect to banish one of their face-up cards face down. Or if you attack with Fenrir, you can also just banish a face-up card face down. So it can break boards, it can prevent boards, it gets you a consistency piece. And just that little awkwardness with the Bystials is why I'm a little hesitant, but for the most part, I think it's fine, especially at 1. So yeah, with that, that's the monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell and trap portion of the video. Now that we're on the spell and trap portion of the deck, we're going to be starting off with 3 Primeval Planet Pearl Rhino. I've said it once and I'll say it again, and I'll say it as many times as it needs to be heard. This card, much like Reinoheart, basically kickstarts the entire engine, right? As you activate it, then you get to add any tier monster from your deck to your hand. It boosts all your tiers and your fusions by 500, and then when a tier monster gets shuffled back into the deck, whether you're like fusion summoning it or like shuffling it back with like a Mudora or a Keldor or whatever, it's able to pop a card on the field. So yeah, this card, it does pretty much everything. So yeah, gotta play it at 3. Then to go with our 3 planets, we're playing 3 Tearlaments Scream. So this card is just like another consistency piece, right? As if you have a face-up Tearlament monster and you or your opponent decides to normal or special summon, you get to mill 3 cards. And then for the rest of this turn, your opponent's monsters lose 500 attack, which this is probably the best card to be able to pair with something like Reinoheart. So yeah, as you get to normal the Reinoheart, and then you get to activate both of their effects, right? So you mill 3 first, and then depending on what you mill, that's typically what's going to influence what you send off with the Reinoheart. But even if you're pairing this card with like a Tearlaments Kashtira or a Merrli or even a Scheiren, you're just milling so many cards that the value that you generate is just always going to be worth it. And then when it's sent to the graveyard, by card effect, you're able to search your deck for any Tearlaments trap. Then for the other spells, that's it for the 3 ofs, but for the 2 ofs, we're playing 2 King Sarcophagus. If you want to play the Horus engine, you pretty much have to play the King Sarcophagus, otherwise those cards don't do anything, right? But yeah, you activate this card, and then you can discard any card from your hand for cost, so it's a great way of getting rid of your Shufflers and your Tribute Karmas without having to summon them or set them and pop them or whatever, and just fill up your graveyard with Horus monsters to potentially just overwhelm your opponent straight up. So yeah, I really enjoyed King Sark. Sometimes I'm considering just playing it at 1 and just risking milling it, but 2 is probably like the perfect ratio. Then for the only other 2 of spell in the deck, 2 Triple Tactics Talent. This is basically the only card that we play that allows us to somewhat go second more consistently. And even if we're going first, right, it's still a phenomenal card, as if our opponent decides to hit us with any hand trap, which is going to be pretty likely, we can rip apart their hand, take away the most impactful card, and then just proceed to continue to combo off as if they just, you know, -1 themselves for no reason. So yeah, talent really, really strong. And then for the 1-ofs, we're playing the 1 Pressure Planet Raid Saw. So this can either add your Fenrirs, or you can also add your Tearlaments Kashtira off of this card, but it's nowhere near as good as Primeval Planet Pearl Rhino, which is why we only play the 1. And then we play the Foolish Brigade, being Foolish Burial to send your monsters, Foolish Burial Goods to send your spells and traps, and Tearlaments Grief, which is basically Foolish Burial plus Emergency Teleport plus Monster Reborn combined into 1, as you can special summon a tier monster from either your grave or your deck, and then you send something on the field from your side of the field to the graveyard with the same type of attribute. So what you could do, right, is like, say you open up Grief plus like Tier Cache, you activate the Tearlaments Grief, and this is like no other tier cards in hand, right? So you'll activate the Tearlaments Grief, you special summon the Reinoheart, then you send the Reinoheart to grave. Reinoheart's effect will trigger in the graveyard, and from there you can chain the Tearlaments Kashtira in your hand. So you special summon the Tier Cache, you banish the Grief, and then you special summon the Reinoheart. Even if you have like nothing to discard, you can still special summon the Reinoheart because it specials first, then discards. However, this only works because you have the Tier Cache in your hand previously, right? If you don't have a tier card in your hand, then you can't activate the Reinoheart to begin with, but as long as it's there first, then you can do that. And you know, just that little technique, I guess, definitely goes a long way, because then you get the Tier Cache for free, you get the Reinoheart for free, and then you get to mill 3+1 specific card of your choosing. So yeah, I really, really like this. And not only that, but when this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add back any of your banished tier traps. So yeah, it's pretty solid. And that's it for the spell lineup. And then for the traps, just the 2 Solyak with the 1 Trivy Karma. Nothing to say there, really standard stuff. And with that, that's the spell and trap lineup. And now we can finally move on to the extra deck. Now that we're on the extra deck portion of the video, I think I want to start with the Link monsters first. So as a result, we're going to be playing the 1 IP Masquerena, whose only goal is to summon either SP Little Knight to banish a card, or it will be special summoning Sprite Sprint, which allows us to foolish Tearlaments Merrli pretty much whenever we want. And you may be wondering, is it even worth it to play something like Sprite Sprint just to be able to foolish Tearlaments Merrli? And the answer is yes, whether it's your turn or your opponent's turn, but let's focus on the opponent's turn first, because that's going to be the moment when you summon it more likely. There are a lot of situations where you're going into Sprite Sprint, for example, and then sending Merrli is a lot more advantageous, as the Merrli will either turn into a Tearlaments Ruthless for a special summoning gate, or it will turn into a Kaleidoheart for a shuffle. And that's not even to mention when you pair it with Primeval Planet Pearl or Rhino, right? So compared to SP Little Knight, which would only get 1 card removed, if you go into Kaleidoheart plus Planet, you're getting 2 cards removed in that instance instead. And there are a lot of times where that can just end the game right then and there, right? But yeah, this card obviously has values during your opponent's turn, but even during your turn, like I said, having access to Tearlaments Merrli is just greatly appreciated, because there are certain situations where you just need to get a fusion summon off, even during your turn, to be able to go for a game or whatever, and you just aren't hitting. And having something that's like a guaranteed way to be able to get access to that is just always going to be greatly appreciated. And for the final point, I guess, you can also just make this and send something like Scatter Shot, right? I know it's a cheesy way to win, but it does happen more often than not, because this deck does get pretty grindy at times. So having a win condition in time that you can always access to is also very, very much appreciated. But yeah, Sprite Sprint, yeah, I definitely feel like it has a room in the pure Tearlament deck in most cases. So yeah, it's just a phenomenal card to have access to. And that's it for the links. And then for the exceeds, we're playing the 1 Totally Awesome, as it is our only form of Omni Negates. But it's a really, really good one, right? As if it's able to negate and destroy the card, you're able to then take that card for yourself and then use it during your opponent's turn by setting it to your side of the field. And as if that wasn't already good enough, when this card is sent to the graveyard, you're also able to add back any water monster from your graveyard to your hand. So you can add back Reinoheart, Tear Cash, Mud Dragon. You can even add back itself if you really want to. So I don't know, say for example you're playing against a what's that deck called? The one that basically just like disrupts your extra deck by making you send cards. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's like a stun deck or whatever. So you just send the Totally Awesome to the grave, and then it comes back to your extra deck, and they basically accomplish nothing. I'm sure you guys will let me know down below which one it is if it sounds familiar. But yeah, Toad is just a phenomenal card, and we make Totally Awesome through Bahamut Shark, as it just requires 2 water monsters, which are very, very easy to come by. Then for the other rank 4s that we play, we're playing the 1 number 62 Garrus the Timeless. So this card's effect, whether you're special summoning or like drawing cards, it's fine. You're typically not going to be making this as often as you may think, but it's just a nice option to have, especially because it's like another way that allows us to at the same time generate advantage by drawing cards and then also discarding bricks. So if you're like a shuffler or a Trivy Karma, this is another way that you can get rid of it without having to rely on King Sarcophagus. And then just being able to special summon anything from the graveyard is also pretty fine when you're trying to go for game. And then speaking of going for game, you can also just like double the attack of a monster for whatever reason. But you got to make sure that you actually OTK them at that point, because then you're going to be skipping the battle phase of your next turn, which is not something that you typically want in a deck like this. But yeah, all of the Garrus effects are pretty solid. It's not something that comes up frequently, but I still feel like it deserves an inclusion. Then you have Time Thief Redoer, which allows you to essentially just for those hands where you're going like Reinoheart and Scheiren on the field, you can overlay them into Redoer and then detach the Scheiren, and it won't be detaching as like a cost or whatever. It'll be part of the effect. So that means you're going to be able to activate Scheiren's effective fusion summon and just go off from there. But not only that, this card is just a general nuisance to take or to deal with for your opponent, as you're constantly taking free advantage from your opponent's cards, right? If you take a monster, it can banish itself. If you take a spell, you get a free draw. If you take a trap, you can basically like wing blast something from your opponent's side of the field back to the top of their deck. So yeah, all 3 of its effects are really good, and I just love this card in this deck for the utility that it offers you. And then for the final rank 4, the 1 Abyss Dweller. Dweller's broken. What more needs to be said? And then for the final exceed we're playing the 1 Zombie Vampire to go with our Horus engine, just to be able to mill 4 cards. from our deck and our opponent's deck, and then gain knowledge, and then just, milling is good in a deck like this. So yeah, gotta play one. And that's it for the Exceeds. And then for the fusions, we're playing the Mud Dragon of the Swamp, the Garura Wings of Resonant Life, and Predaplant Draco Stapelli. Just really good, solid fusion summonable monsters that we can pretty much bring out in most games. And then for the other cards, we're playing one Grapha Dragon Overlord of Dark World. This is basically because we want to take advantage of cards like Beastking of the Swamp a little bit more effectively. So, having something like this that we can go into, and then its effect is also pretty solid too, because it's like a pseudo negate, but it only works on spells, normal traps, and monster effects. So, yeah, just, it's 3,200 attacks, so it allows you to go for game. It's another fusion summon monster that we can make. It's a pseudo negate because it doesn't negate an effect, but it changes their effect to discard a card. So there are times where you can just make yourself discard something that you don't want, like a Trivia Karma, a Soliak, whatever. But it's fine. And then for the final two, we have the Ruklos to negate special summons, and the Kaleidoheart to shuffle cards back. And if it's sent to the graveyard, you can also Foolish any tier card. So with that, that's the Tearlament deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya!